Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going on for track comparison number 5 for this theme of studio versus live. This time we're looking at the band At the Drive-In, checking out a track from their 2000 album Relationship of Command called Quarantined. Let's dive into the studio version, see what's going on with that, discuss it, analyze it, break it down, and then we'll dive into a live recording of it. Let's go. So we are in 4/4, but the bass line is giving us groupings of 3 and 5. The guitar over here is giving us just some noise. It's really awesome hearing the bass drive so much of this. The vocals are... The rain's still going on. The vocals are obviously quite in the spotlight, but the guitars are very textural, setting up atmosphere, and the bass is what's providing counterpoint to the vocals in that big chorus we just had. Sounds like we finally got rid of the rain. The contrast between these more spacious sections exploratory sections and the bombastic choruses. Yeah, it's interesting how much the rain was actually present on that track, given it could have just been the intro and they chose to keep it around as a background texture. I'm gonna assume that's a lead into the next track. Yeah, I kind of enjoyed that. It's a bit noisier than I typically like, but vocally, melodically, stuff's right up my alley. And when it's paired against some of the less noisy sections, that's some good stuff. It's coming to my attention that despite mostly listening to emo and post-hardcore growing up, there's a lot of stuff I've missed. Really makes me want to dive into all of it. Who would be interested in watching a channel where I just release by release go through like post-hardcore from like one of the earliest albums where you can clearly say, oh, this is, proto post-hardcore, and go through like at least a decade's worth of it, album by album, hundreds of albums a year. I don't know if anyone would be down for that, but I kind of want to get through that journey anyways. So I might not record it, but I think that'd be fun. Why did I bring that up though? Oh yeah, because it's old. It's 2000. I mean, this is coming up on 2.5 decades old. And I don't even think I've heard of the band. I mean, this is pretty much a Cap and Jazz scenario here where I enjoy the music and I was listening to this kind of music around this time. I don't know how I didn't pick up on this, how I never ran into this song. But like there's also like the other side of it. I was listening to this stuff around the inception of the internet. As far as a consumer product, I would say, instead of an enthusiast product. Information just didn't get around like it does now. Even in the early 2000s. That was all Web 1.0 days, man. You were lucky to find a group of people who were like-minded. Nothing like the Web 2.0 social media craze. MySpace, Reddit, Dig. Trying to think of some other Reddit precursors where people, I mean, just forums in general, but you kind of got to know where to go for that. At least with Reddit, it's all on one page, one main domain. But yeah, I would have totally been into this, I think, at however old I would. Actually, dude, I would have been 12. I don't think I was listening to post-hardcore yet. 12. No, I think I was still listening to whatever was on the radio. Anyways, let's talk about the song. It's very texture based, which is typically a common thing I would say about a post-hardcore song, but this one feels more intentional. There is, for lack of a better word, a proggy element to this that reminds me a lot of what the Mars Volta does with their adaptation of post-hardcore sound, in that it generally utilizes many of the same harmonic devices. The melodic lines from the vocals very much fit within the genre. But there's these exploratory segments that feel divorced from my general understanding of how the genre tends to work and feels closer to prog rock's exploration of sound. And I think that's the part I really want to focus on here. We have the build up into the bombastic section, which I'm going to label the A for the build up of the verse. The bombastic section is our B, that's our chorus. We repeat it a lot in here. And then after the chorus, so we have a post chorus exploration. All the instruments, and this is the part I want to focus on because the A and the B are pretty typical. And just a quick recap of that, we have guitars that are primarily giving harmonic information, a bass that is presenting a bit of rhythm, walking a bass line, and generally giving us a quasi-melodic idea, usually juxtaposed with the vocals, which are giving us the main melody, and drums that are sitting in the pocket. Very typical way of building up a post-hardcore track. But this C, this post-chorus, this spatial exploration section is interesting. It's different. On the surface, it looks the same. The guitars are doing atmospheric textural stuff, and the bass is playing these constant eighth notes, walking a bass line. The drums are sitting in a pocket, not doing anything flourishy, no crazy fills, just keeping the time. The description fits the same thing as our A section, but it's really how everything works together here. Well, sort of the fact that they don't. Everything's on their own. The bass's constant eighth notes is absent of its partner. It works as a quasi counterpoint to the vocals, but what happens when you don't have vocals to bounce off of? What does a secondary line sound like without the lead it's typically playing with? Yeah, it's kind of sitting here. It sticks out like a sore thumb. A lot of it is designed to bounce off of the rhythms and melodies that the vocals give, and so it's missing context. I don't think it's a bad idea by itself. It's serviceable, but it certainly excels when it has its partner to dance with. The guitars are separated, doing their own things, primarily contributing the texture of their guitar tones, but instead of just providing harmonic information through chords, they have moving lines, sort of taking the place of the vocal melody, but missing the flow and direction that the vocal melody has. For instance, could you hum me one of the vocal lines in here? Probably the chorus. That's, I think, what we heard the most and what I would say is the catchiest. Even if you can't hum it note for note, you may have only heard it once, like me, and you can probably hear it. Parts of it, at least. You have a vague idea of what it is. But could you hum one of the guitar parts? Yeah, see, I'd wager that's a bit harder. Even for me, my memory tends to be pretty good, especially a song like this that repeats so many sections. I have plenty of time to commit things to memory. I can't hum one of the guitar lines. Primarily, they're lacking shape, flow, direction. They're melodic, but they're missing the catchiness. They're sort of just a collection of notes. But they're both just a collection of notes that don't really point anywhere in isolation, and when you bring them together, it's just a lot of clashing stuff. It's clashing harmonically, the note intervals, it's clashing melodically and rhythmically. They're not emphasizing the same beats. They're not both driving towards the same point. They're not working in tandem towards anything. They're two isolated ideas, and the only reason I told you to listen to them together is to showcase that they can't be listened together. They're not even designed to do that. The drums are completely serviceable. As I mentioned, no fills really. nothing ornamental or flashy, just keeping the beat, keeping the time, sitting in the back and holding everything down, which is quite necessary when there's so many moving parts. But it also sort of feels distant from everything else. The bass has movement. It's constantly changing notes, constantly playing something new. The guitars are playing melodic ideas. Even if they're not exceptionally strong ideas, they're still doing something. And the drums, completely divorced from everything else, just laying down a beat and sitting in the pocket. There is some movement. There's some small tweaks to the guitar tones, and the lines themselves do go places, even if they're not memorable. It's not like it just sits around one note and hovers. There's movement. There's rising and escalating ideas, both in tension and pitch, volume. It's not that it doesn't do anything. It's just a perception of not doing anything. Everything is handled in a way that could use more context. Either one of the guitar lines, I think, would work fine with another melody line to go with it, or maybe even a chord progression, a harmonic device, a foundation for it. The bass is missing its partner, the vocals, and the drums are missing something with drive and direction. They're completely solid, being the foundation for something that isn't here. To me, this is the very concept of isolation, maybe even group isolation. Several people in a single house, none of them conversing with each other. It makes me think of the word quarantine, to be separated from. It's these moments that feel the most separated. And the fact that all of the instruments are doing their own things creates a spaciousness between them. It's not a quiet section. It's certainly not spacious as far as notes. There's constantly sounds coming out of it. But it does feel like there's so much space between the instruments themselves. Everything feels so distant. The rest of the song feels fairly typical for the genre, including, oh, we already went over it, the roles of all the instruments. We've listened to, I feel like post-hardcore's come up more often than usual on this channel. We've listened to quite a bit of it in the last couple of weeks, which I'm quite appreciative of. I love the genre. I love to dig into it. But pretty much anything I've said about any other band we've checked out recently, it qualifies here. It's very texture-based writing with catchy hooks on top of it from the vocals. Except this part. And this part feels so deliberate. It feels lonely. Couple of notes I do want to bring up. Once again, the bass is just excellent. I can't say that enough. The production is fantastic for 2000 as well. It's still a bit more compressed than if it were handled in the modern day, something post 2020. But for 2000, uh, yeah, for something recorded and mastered, mixed in the 2000s, even later 2000s, I'd say that this sounds pretty good for it. It certainly lacks some of the lower fidelity I associate with some of these earlier acts. Maybe At the Drive-In was bigger than I thought, but again, I'd never heard of them until now, so I kind of assume they're underground like many other great post-hardcore bands, which makes the very clear production even more of an anomaly. The dual guitar lines are often nice in the way that they play off of each other. I would like to see more of that in an expanded way, but that's just post-hardcore, especially early on. I don't think we'd hear much of it. And I guess technically, when I think about it, what I am talking about with more work into the dual guitar lines is sort of what becomes of Swancore, which is like progressive post-hardcore. So, I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't really work too well here anyways. There was one other thing I wanted to bring up. Oh, yeah, dual vocals. I think there are two vocalists on this, a primary and a backup. The backup also does harshes. It just creates a lot of vocal timbre variety that I always appreciate. The more sounds you can put in your melodic line, the better. I'm always down for that. Let's dive into some lyrics here, see what's going on there, and then we will check out the live version. So, I'm sure there are probably already some comments down there letting me know about this, and some other people waiting for this moment to happen. I'm reading over some of the stuff on Genius regarding it, and what do I know? The vocalist listed for all the sections is Cedric Bixlar Zavala. And so I'm like, wait a second. I don't really recognize that last name, but there is a Cedric in a band I talked about just a little bit ago, saying that this band sounded like him. So then I scrolled down. Where is the personnel list? Okay. Guitarist Omar Rodriguez Lopez. Now, that person, I do know their last name. And when Omar and Cedric are put together, that's how you get the Mars Volta. So this was their stuff prior to forming the Mars Volta? Either way, this is quite a bit more up my alley than later Mars Volta tends to be. But I can also see a lot of the blueprint being laid out for what the Mars Volta would become. It's interesting too, I remember checking out a really early Mars Volta track. I don't remember what it's called. We watched a music video. I think it's the only music video we have had for Mars Volta on the channel. And I quite enjoyed it. And from that point on, all I got was a bunch of their epics from that one album about the diary they found. And that whole album bounced off of me. And that's ESP. Yeah, what was it? It was something like that. That song worked really well for me, and this reminds me of that. It really feels like this was them starting music with their inspirations on their sleeve. And as they became more accustomed to what they were doing, they walked away from that further and further until they did what they did and became the Mars Volta proper. Which is something that their earlier songs did allude to, but I don't think ever quite struck that sound where it shifted from post-hardcore, but their twist on it, to just being their sound. I really haven't heard anything like Mars Volta. When I hear something even similar-ish to it, I'm like, oh, it's like Mars Volta, just like with this track. I'm not relating it to a genre. I'm relating it to a band. There's something very distinct about these two people and the way that they write together. So yeah, that was surprising, but also it makes perfect sense in retrospect. And it does make me want to check out more early Mars Volta as well as at the drive-in. It really does feel like I've been served up one specific album of theirs that just isn't for me, but there's probably a plethora of stuff from them that I would really enjoy. So, all right, let's get into the lyrics. This song is all about the ridiculous ways that people can get thrown into the prison system and the cycles of negativity and violence and corruption that being in the prison system can have on somebody. That's like all of it right there. Verse 1 says autonomous machete for hands, warden and judge hide behind masks. Wet raindrop lull small rationings, exhume the rhetoric, and break the weak in single file. The idea that the wardens and judges hide behind their stature in the community by way of their jobs, the prison warden and the judge, but that they're working in tandem, being an autonomous machete. They end up putting people into the jails even if it isn't necessarily necessary. I'm going to skip over a few lines since there's a lot of repetition that ties everything together. We get to verse 2 though, and we talk about homelessness. It says, shackled the grapple, and the sentinels found, binoculars watched the cardboard towns. Strung up in webs, the net was flung over the auditorium. Slave trade the weak, no call to arms. Those who have no power in society, particularly those who are living in poverty or even homeless, just throws the nets over them and grabs them, turns it into a slave trade of the weak. And of course, the slave trade concept is about the exceptionally cheap and oftentimes free labor that is created through the prison system. At least in the US, we have a lot of for profit prison systems, and the prisoners are outsourced to do work, usually for the city or the local government, but it's still work nonetheless, and they're paid, if anything, pennies on the dollar. It is a way to have kept slavery going. Both verses end with the lines, sanction this outbreak, a virus conspires, push becomes shove, days become months, I seem to have forgotten the warmth of the sun. The idea that this collection of those most vulnerable and to put them into the prison system is like a virus. It continues to spread through the weakest communities. And the people inside, second after minute after hour, days to weeks towards months, they've been locked away for so long they've forgotten the warmth of the sun, which could also be read as forgetting what freedom feels like. Now, curiously, the chorus and subsequently the outro, I have less of a read on, even given the Genius annotation. It says, feeding frenzy, it's contagious. Have trigger, will travel. A single spark can start a spectral fire. Have trigger, will travel. Actually, I think it's a little clearer now that I've actually said it out loud. It's something about reading it. It doesn't always click, but when you say it out loud, it like forces me at least to like engage with the words in a different way. Maybe I should just start reading it out loud even when I pause the camera to figure out what's going on. Anyways, the idea is if we work together, we can create a movement against this. It's contagious. A single spark can start a spectral fire. It might start with me, but if I share my passion with others, they might also rally against this, and they could create the fire that ignites someone else, and this single spark can create this entire flame. It is contagious fire, constantly jumping from one source to the next, and if that fire is a metaphor for passion, for drive, for motivation, one person speaking out against this can rally thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people to get behind it. With any luck, maybe we can stop this modern day slave trade and keep people out of prisons who don't deserve to be there. All right. How all that fits with the song, I mean, this is typical Mars Volta. I feel like the song and the lyrics are a bit more distinct, not usually lining up, and I feel the same here. There's obviously the parallels between the isolation between all the instruments in our C section, and the message here is that we just need to come together so we can defeat this. They keep putting lines between us. Don't let that happen. But aside from that one section, everything else feels rather straightforward for the genre, and not many things I can tie back into the lyrical themes. Alright. So, with that said, let's dive into this live version here. Interestingly, it is an extra 2 minutes longer, which, now that I know it's Mars Volta, I can only imagine there's an extended spatial section in here. Regardless, let's dive in and see what At the Drive-In is bringing to the table today. I said that like we just started the video. I don't know if it's because the guitar is louder, but I'm hearing a lot more dissonance than I remember. I'm trying to figure out who the second backup vocal is, though. Oh, there we go. I didn't realize there was a keyboardist over here. Well, I called it at least. Well, like I said, if nothing else, at least I called it an extended spatial exploration section. I don't know what y'all want me to say here. Oh, here's a cool video though. How at the Drive-In changed post-hardcore from the channel Lie Likes Music. Why don't I know that channel? I'm gonna have to check that out. It's only a 12-minute video. That's nothing. Well, I suppose what I can say is I didn't enjoy that. But the thing is the production on this has a bit more of a bassy punch to it, which normally I dislike. I'm not a real big fan of boosting up bass levels for the size, but here I think it worked for one reason or another. Something tells me it's a little bit more than just the simple idea of moving the bass, uh, uh, bumping the bass up a little bit. There's probably more to the EQing here than I can discern, but I enjoyed the largeness of the choruses here, more so than the studio version, and that line that Cedric comes in on after the extended section, coming back into the final chorus. Um, at the end of the line, when he says spectral fire, he pulls it down a little bit. But on the first line back, he ramps it up about a third, maybe a fifth, and just puts a little bit of compression on it. Really belts this note out. Just a phenomenal way to increase the intensity and lay in that this is the end of the track. We got to bring this back. I really like that. I almost wish you would have done it a couple more times, if nothing else, than at least on the final line of our final chorus as well, to punctuate coming in and then to punctuate the ending. But that, man, I didn't know the dude had those chops. That was so good. Love that line. And there are things in here I think that work well, even in the spectral areas. It's just the extended one meanders for way too long and disrupts the entire song. It is just about half the length of the original song altogether that they devoted just to this extended section, and I think if it had done anything to add on to the song in any way, that would have been running parallels with the themes presented in either the music or the lyrics, I would have been more receptive of it. But it does everything in a brand new direction, and it just never quite clicks for me. And when you add in the fact that, unlike with their later experimentation with sound and extended solo-y sections like this, I don't quite think they had the skill to pull it off yet. Here it sounds, to me at least, a bit amateur, and the many times that there are odd notes or moments where a note feels like it stops a little too early, it doesn't sound intentionally muted or intentionally dissonant or intentionally chromatic. It sounds like they're just messing around, and this is what's come of it. I guess to use a word, though I think it is a bit harsher than I want to imply, it's what my vocabulary has offered me at the moment. This feels amateurish compared to what they would do later with similar composition. And yes, that's the whole point of growth, right? We're talking, I don't know, at least 5 years, I think, between this and, what they would do later with Mars Volta. It's, did I say 5 years? No, probably more than that, right? Maybe 10. Regardless, even if it's just five, that is plenty of room for compositional maturity to occur, for the groups to grow as musicians and composers and to do things better. Like, duh, Bryan, the stuff they did later is better. But that's sort of what it is to me in retrospect. I don't know that this would have clicked with me if I had heard it at the time either, but I might be a little more forgiving of it because I haven't heard what they would become. If you asked me to listen to an abrasive, aggressive, avant garde, extended atmospheric section from these two folk in one of their bands, I would certainly pick something from their later Mars Volta catalog than this live version, specifically of Quarantined. It just doesn't quite come off as effortless and controlled. And through that, it feels like a bunch of people on stage just noodling around and hoping something interesting-esque comes out of that. It feels like watching practice live. And while I have had my criticisms about the Mars Volta, I don't think I've ever said that it sounds like they're practicing um, while they're recording in the studio. There's an intentionality to it that they developed over time. And again, I'm not throwing shade at them at this period of time, but simply pointing it out. You can tell this is early on in their experimentation, and I don't quite think it lands as well. I'm curious. People who are fans of the Mars Volta, more specifically their experimental stuff, what did you take away on this extended bridge here? Did you still enjoy this nonetheless, or do you also feel there's a bit of a divide where this isn't quite as pleasurable to you as what they would do in the future? Those are my thoughts on At the Drive-In's Quarantined. But what are yours? Let me know your thoughts, perspectives, comments. Let me know if you disagree with me, you agree with me, you were along with the surprise. You had no clue that this was half of the Mars Volta before the Mars Volta. Or if you were already in on it and waiting for me to get surprised. Put all that stuff down in the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you kid, I think I was going to say can, and I changed it to could for a moment. Yeah, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. I obviously need to get away from the camera right now because my brain is getting fried. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC. As usual, we're going to check out a couple special selection. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.